Welcome back to our Blue Z Water channel. Today I have with me Kevin Kramer, CEO of US Cryotherapy. And this is a therapy I started about 5-6 months ago, and I'm very impressed with this therapy. And as you know, I teach a bunch of holistic skills. This is the one that you probably can't buy at home unless you're really wealthy, and this is one you do have to go out for, but it's quite an impressive therapy, so I really include this on my list of must therapies. And today we're going to discuss the ins and outs of this therapy, how it works. I also came to this therapy vis-a-vis Wim Hof. I was reading his teachings on cold therapy, but I decided that doing ice baths was a little too intense for me and heard about cryotherapy. So I went around town and I tried different systems, and this one by far exceeded all the other systems, and we'll discuss those systems in this interview. So welcome, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Andrew. Thank you.
So why don't you start off, just give me a kind of a brief background on, US cryotherapy and why you got into it, and just a kind of quick overview.
Yeah, actually, I sort of happened into it. I spent 23 years in big pharma and clinical and product development. And my dad, who was very entrepreneurial, was traveling in Europe in 2010 and found a treatment center in Prague. He has a place in Prague, and a neighbor of his introduced him, and just fell in love with the technology, much like you talked about, once he went in and used the facility a few times. And so came back with the idea that we start the industry in the United States as a family. So my two brothers, myself, and my dad launched the first retail treatment center in Northern California, which is our home base, in 2011. And so what you've seen then is the immersion basically of the cryotherapy industry from that sort of point of genesis. And, basically what we did though is evaluate the equipment in Europe at that time. And we used the electric refrigerated walk-in technology. The idea to the United States, we started it using the electric refrigerated systems that were being used in the hospital clinics in Europe for all of the research. Primarily because in our evaluation of it, we didn't want to deal with liquid nitrogen. There were some inherent safety and risk factors and cost of operation and other issues. So that's how we started the industry, and we slowly expanded to a second company-owned location through 2014 and sold some equipment as a distributor to a few professional sports teams, and then basically pivoted the equipment. We were having issues with serviceability and parts from Germany, and so we decided to invest as a family more into the business and to developing our own equipment. And so we did that with a partner in Sacramento and launched our own technology, our own chambers in 2016. And then everything for us sort of started to expand rapidly. We started our franchising division. We've added 20 locations there, and we added 3 new company-owned centers. And we're growing steadily until, of course, COVID hit, and that had some implications on the retail services businesses. But 2021, we've gotten back on track, and we'll start the growth trend again. So we're a little bit different than most of the other centers as it relates to the technology. But we also started the expansion of other services within the centers that complement the recovery. So things like compression therapy and deep muscle percussion therapy and red light therapy, and we have some infrared sauna in some of our locations, and we now do some slimming and toning in locations for beauty and body as well. And so we're sort of an all-inclusive wellness center concept, and I think you're starting to see that that's become very popular in certain areas of the country for people to recover faster and feel better, right? Improves health overall and helps with recoveries.
I teach a lot of skills that require people learn and practice, and it's pretty, I get people to do this, but it's 1 in 1,000. Mm-hmm. In a sense, I'm not saying I envy you, but I admire the simplicity of this in terms of a consumer walking in, getting a experience and getting benefit. The cryotherapy for sure in a short amount of time does give benefit. If I had a center, I probably have so many other technologies and skills teachings that it would probably get too complicated. Mm-hmm. But I just look at, as a practitioner, I look at every therapy. I look at its key actions, And then I try to recommend them based on the healing action, and then teach people to integrate these skill sets. So in terms of my audience, I really do want to educate people on this particular therapy and its health benefits. I can start off just from my own experience. I call this a neuroendocrine, very stimulating on what I call the neuroendocrine system. It basically is a huge catalyst. When you do this profound cold therapy, it catalyzes the body to go into a sort of self-heal mechanism. Wim Hof teaches a lot about the benefits of cold therapy. I guess you've probably taken a look at his work, I assume.
Yeah.
And how do you correlate the cryotherapy to his teachings?
Well, I mean, look, the core principles of using, temperature to stimulate reactivity in the body is very similar, right? So cold therapy from our perspective is thermogenic. It's a little bit different than, say, plunging in water. It's more metabolic. So water permeates the skin, gets into the bloodstream. So naturally the body then slows the metabolism to avoid heat exchange so that you don't get hypothermic. And Wim Hof's teachings is that you can control a lot of that, right, mentally, by slowing the metabolism and lasting longer and thermoregulating your own body within that environment. So we're a little bit different, but the same principles apply, right? So the cold shock stimulates the release of recovery and proteins and hormones. Essentially what it does is, as a skin shock therapy, it sends signals to the brain, and you're right, it's a neurocrine activator, right? It basically stimulates protection and repair mode in the body, releasing norepinephrine, which is a very powerful anti-inflammatory, but also it's a neurotransmitter, which is great for mood and cognition and energy, and then also a flood of endorphins in that fight or flight response. And those are very good and powerful proteins and hormones that modulate, recovery and repair. So once you also have sort of a blood movement process with cold therapy, that you're pooling all the blood into the core when the skin senses this really cold temperature to protect against heat transfer, but it's in a shorter duration, obviously, than what you would do in a Wim Hof procedure. And then when the blood releases, you have a delivery system for those modulated hormones and proteins. So we see great recoveries from acute injuries, chronic conditions, post-surgical, skin conditions, whatever it might be, based on the anti-inflammatory properties of the therapy, right? Everything is, from a systemic standpoint, relates to inflammation in one way or another, including immune system function. And so what we're really doing is stimulating recovery based on cold shock therapy, and it's a very short duration. And then we use the other modalities in the center to help accelerate that.
In terms of autoimmune issues, do you notice, or do you have any reporting on, let's say, fibromyalgia? I mean, there's so many autoimmune diseases, from asthma, fibromyalgia, even thyroid Hashimoto's. I mean, that term autoimmune is inflammatory in nature.
Yep.
COVID itself has a cytokine storm inflammatory cycle that is actually what causes people to die, the reaction to the virus with inflammation.
Yep.
And you can't get resolution, so the body just inflames itself to death, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So any evidence or reporting on autoimmune in general, inflammatory diseases?
Yeah, so anecdotally, from our perspective, there are a lot of studies out of Europe. There's nothing, it's a non-regulated, non-medical space in the United States currently, right? So there are no specific indications that are approved, nor devices that are approved. But in Europe, they went through that process in the hospital clinics, and it is approved for fibromyalgia, for rheumatoid arthritis, and for chronic inflammatory skin conditions. So, eczema, psoriasis, atopic dermatitis. And those are all inflammatory conditions. And there are some studies in autoimmune disease as well. And you're right. I mean, it's basically the inflammatory process, knocking that down so that the immune system can be more functional and help repair itself.
Yeah, I want to share a screen real quick. So this is just a chart that I put out for some of the major technologies that I recommend that all have different actions. Some are antimicrobial, some work at the cellular level very deeply. I would consider cryotherapy actually working deep at the cellular level, because it's so the body it's quite a permeable therapy. The cold goes very deep and causes the body to do this reorganizational activity. But the reason I bring up this chart is most of these therapies I call what I call fire therapies. If you think of Ayurvedic medicine, fire, like if you use fire to burn things up, to kill microbes. And I don't want to go in great depth about what these therapies are, but they basically are, in a sense, pro-inflammatory. That therapeutically they use some type of fire nature to do a healing, but there is a sidebar inflammatory aspect which you want to mitigate. So there's only 2 therapies on this list that I consider profoundly anti-inflammatory, and cryotherapy is on the list. And as I wrote, superb anti-inflammatory, helps regulate neuroendocrine system, stimulates metabolism. Google Wim Hof to learn about the benefits of cold therapy.
Yep.
Cons can be quite intense, so need to be careful when starting, breaking slowly, and check with your healthcare practitioner.
Sure.
Now, the only other therapy that's a profoundly and also kind of a new therapy out of Asia is, it's a hydrogen therapy, or what I actually sell is something called Brown's gas, which has hydrogen, oxygen, and what's called plasma state water. But basically, it's known as hydrogen therapy. Now, this is a gas therapy. It permeates deep into the body and works on inflammation profoundly. So anybody who's wrestling with inflammation, I would suggest these 2 therapies for sure. Sign up, do cryotherapy 2, 3, 4 times a week, however much you can do it, and then do hydrogen therapy at home and get real consistent with that. So we can send you this chart. You can take a look at it, but I did want to bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, some of what you have on there, we utilize at our centers as well, the vibration therapy or deep muscle percussion. We have PEMF at a lot of our centers as well, which is very good for pain. We sort of focus on, the systemic part, which is the chamber, and really, that cold shock therapy and the release of the modulating hormones and proteins, and then complement that with other therapy just to target whatever specifically is bothering the customer. So we do localized cold therapy and spot treatments to target range of motion and improve circulation in areas. We do the deep muscle percussion to soften and loosen up, tight areas in the body. And then we'll do, red light therapy, for example, which is more cellular that you're talking about. It actually charges the cells and activates mitochondria. And so there's some very complementary steps that you take for recovery when you come into a U.S. cryotherapy center, and our technicians will advise whatever the best protocol is for the issue that the customer is dealing with.
Right. I tend to deal more with, I took one of my clients actually has prostate cancer into your center in Arizona to introduce him to it. Another issue that I'll bring up personally is that I integrated a thyroid protocol with cryotherapy as part of a thyroid protocol. So if you have, let's say, I for instance, just genetic, I do a lot of holistic therapies, but I could not move my T3 number technically up. So I went on some very beginning dose thyroid hormone and then integrated the cryotherapy. And anybody working on a thyroid issue, you might find that this really complements that type, any hormone therapy, not just, let's say, testosterone, bioidentical testosterone. But you can contact me as far as creating synergistic programs. Let's say you are working on an endocrine, let's say even adrenal burnout. Stress is off the roof today for many people. This is also just, when you do this therapy, and this is the essence of Wim Hof. Wim Hof came to cold therapy because his wife committed suicide and he was completely losing it. And he was seeking spiritual resolution. And for him, this is sort of like a super yogic practice that tricks the nervous system out of its constant anxiety state. And I can testify that definitely this is a piece. Again, there's other therapies that we could recommend that help with it deeply with the limbic nervous system. A lot of people these days are studying the vagus nerve, for instance, vagus nerve manipulation. There's a lot going on in kind of different pieces. What we're trying to help people with is a kind of a whole view practice and kind of get a deeper vision. But this is definitely a whole body, global, multidimensional therapy. I would not include it if I didn't experience it directly. So yeah, your growth is impressive. I mean, to expand that quickly, wow, that's just from a business point of view, I'm quite impressed with that level of expansion.
Well, thank you.
Did you not suffer, what do they call it, business? You were able to keep up with the expansion, so to speak?
Yeah, we've run it as a family-run business and planned really a slower expansion, but a consistent expansion pathway. And I will, say that 2020 threw a wrench into a lot of people's plans, and that sort of stopped things for a period of time. But we want to make sure that our centers open and operate, from a consistency standpoint, like one another. And there's a very elaborate training process that we go through for all of our locations, and identifying basically the modalities that are in use that are consistent across the country. And so as the one brand in the whole body cryotherapy space, as both the founders and the leaders in our space, we're the only ones that do the walk-in whole body chambers like you've experienced. Now, there are some independent operators out there and some equipment that's now being sold for other locations, but we started and consistently have been that one brand that utilizes what we believe to be the safest technology with the greatest outcomes. And so that's been sort of our mantra from the beginning. And I think people recognize us, in particular our customers, as that type of a brand.
Some of the do's and don'ts. Well, first of all, when you go in, you fill out a health questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the, what you call for real contraindications for this therapy?
Yeah, we have, a waiver system. So we want to do a health screening to make sure that people don't have any of the contraindications of cold therapy. And originally it came out of a cold air Congress in Europe, and there were recommendations. So, the things that you would normally think about, such as cardiovascular risk factors, bypass or a pacemaker, something that you would actually change blood pressure to a certain extent and stimulate accelerated circulation wouldn't be of benefit. And so, yeah, you go through the process, and there are absolute contraindications, which means as an organization, we would not allow whole body chamber use, but there are a number of other modalities in the center that can be used for, pain and recovery as well. And then there are relative contraindications, which basically state that there's no known, significant contraindication in that category, but we believe it's in your best interest to talk to your doctor about it and get an approval to use cold therapy. So it's still, it is a cold shock treatment, and it can, systemically change things most of the time for the better. And then also there's just benign contraindications. If you have an open wound track or something, we want to make sure we cover it, and a few other areas. So you go through that process of wavering in at our center at your first time visit. And then essentially it's a pretty simple, review of those contraindications your next time through. Every time through our centers, waivers in, and we track and log every customer treatment in the chamber and monitor skin temperature changes. And so we're pretty thorough about that part of the process.
Also, I like to address, especially with all this COVID going on, the Omicron right now, there's a fine line. I mean, if you're 20 years old, let's say, and you go for a big run and you kind of got a little bit of a flu and you go for a run, you burn it up, that's a 20-year-old can almost utilize intense metabolic activity to overcome an infection. But I would say probably if somebody's sick, you should probably stay away from the cryotherapy until you recover. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the wavering process. If you have, fever, chills, any of the active symptoms, not just of COVID, but of any illness or virus, you need to let those symptoms subside before you can come in and use the chamber. I will tell you that from an immune system benefit, we see, and anecdotally again, but people that are utilizing our facilities on a regular basis tend to be healthier and don't get sick as frequently. The immune system function is superior to those that probably don't use anything to improve that status. And then obviously the recovery is faster as well. So once you're asymptomatic, I think people, think about moving blood throughout the body and reducing inflammation. That part of the process alone is very good for the body to self-repair. And so we've seen phenomenal results as it relates to not necessarily COVID, but just, generally stimulating faster recoveries and improving overall better health status.
Right. This is, I do lymphatic practices. I teach them. So this would definitely have lymphatic, acts as a pump on the lymphatic system. There's a term in Chinese medicine called qi stagnation. So basically, again, this would stimulate energy flow and energy circulation. In my work, I can break it down to specific pathways that are blocked. There's other dimensions of what I always preach is multidimensional. So this is a whole body therapy. Going to reemphasize that again. PMF is a whole body therapy. There are not that many therapies that you could call whole body. There are isolated therapies, but it will stimulate the movement of what qi, or help with qi stagnation. I would assume that if somebody had COVID and they're over the major symptoms, this is just me saying, it probably would help with what's called long-term COVID. And really, again, if a section of the body got hit and it's not quite repairing, this is going to help the body go after, kind of seek out all the different sections of the body and help in the repair process. But I don't know if there are reports with like you say, I think it's a boost on the immune system. And if you do get sick, you're probably going to process it in a healthier way.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, again, anecdotally, but you think about people that have, high risk factors and are doing very poorly with COVID. A lot of it has to do with systemic inflammation that the body's not ridding itself of. And when you talk about the impact on, the organs and the autoinflammatory diseases and other things, most of those are based on the body not recognizing, inflammatory cytokines the way that it's supposed to and eliminating them. And so if you can reset the body and the immune system to a point where it's performing better, naturally your outcomes in every area are going to be better. Right.
Yeah. The other thing with COVID, I guess, is, with any infection, does the body have the a lot of this, we were going to another area of holistic medicine, which is systemic toxicity. One definite theory of people getting sick is that the gut is filthy.
Mm-hmm.
The first level of your immune system is your gut flora.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like a healthy septic tank, if that's not functioning, the pathogens come in, they take a seat, the body's trying to fight with a secondary immune system. That's when the inflammation comes in. So I don't know exactly how to frame cryotherapy as far as a systemic detox protocol, but obviously anybody who's dealing with a compromised immune system needs to look at that element, cleaning up the body, regrowing their bacteria in their gut, the gut-brain relationship. I don't know if you have colon health therapists who talk about this therapy and how it affects their clients or how it affects colon health.
Well, I did a podcast with a gentleman out of Salt Lake City, and he's very big into the microbiome and talking a lot about how, and he's a frequent user of whole body cryotherapy in our facility in Salt Lake City, and talked a lot about how he feels this helps with the neutralization of the microbiome issue, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's gut health. It's inflammation that starts in the gut at a microorganism level, and then the bacteria spreads and causes, inflammatory conditions in the body in a number of different.
Just to reiterate, colon's supposed to be for some people, they have incredibly good gut flora, it never gets compromised. So that's your first level of defense. And when that flora is healthy, people, even if they eat like crap, they poop regularly,
Mm-hmm.
they have a really good working colon. So I just want to emphasize, it's sort of a luck of the draw, but there are ways to grow back natural good flora. But what we're saying is, if that gets bypassed and these negative microorganisms get in, that's where part of the reason for the inflammatory response kicks in. The body's trying to solve this toxicity problem, this invasion problem.
Yep.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that secondary therapy, hydrogen therapy, Brown's gas, is used to rebuild septic tanks. A dead septic tank can be brought back to life by Brown's gas. So if you drink Brown's gas water, how do cryotherapy, you're going to get a great synergy there and start to deal with this gut problem, which means you're going to have less inflammation. So you want to work at it. You don't just want to knock back the inflammation. You want to find out, investigate why is the body going into inflammation to begin with.
Right.
So there was a problem. The chamber one day they were repairing it. It was on a weekend, so it was several days, and I was so addicted to the cryotherapy. I went all over Albuquerque and I tried all the different chambers.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, I was not impressed. The nitrogen-based chambers.
Mm-hmm.
The nitrogen-based chambers, you start at normal room temperature, and then they make it cold, cold, cold. But the peak cold is not very long.
Yeah.
And when you go into the tank, the U.S. Cryotherapy, it's cold as soon as you walk in. So that 3.5 minutes I'm in there, it's sustained cold. And so I just found the chamber walk-in total body chamber way more effective.
Yeah, it's, having started the industry and then obviously been flooded from Europe with manufacturers and distributors of other products that weren't terribly successful, honestly, in Europe. There are a number of companies that have banned the use of liquid nitrogen for whole body cooling because of the inherent risk factors. But, there's promotion of it being negative 270 degrees, negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just not real. They're measuring the temperature of the release of nitrogen as it vaporizes and cools. And so it's been deemed partial body cooling, PBC, in a number of studies. Dr. Hausworth did a very good study in comparing the two technologies. And when you're cooling with forced air from the bottom up, laws of inertia, right? So it vaporizes, you're not getting the same type of temperatures around the upper part of the body because that nitrogen vapor needs to be ventilated so that you don't inhale it and asphyxiate. And so there's inherently risk factors there, but also there's not the same whole body cooling. So there's whole body cooling, or WBC, which is now the walk-in complete head to toe exposure using electric systems. And then there's partial body cooling. And anybody that's done, the partial body cooling or the nitrogen saunas and then comes into our facility, we don't even need to prompt it. They're like, this is totally different.
That was my experience.
Yeah.
But, night and day.
And it's not to say that people aren't getting some extremity cooling. If you went in and you had a knee issue or an ankle issue or something like that, and you were trying to deal with that, you might feel like you were getting some appropriate therapy in a nitrogen sauna. But the reality of it is the therapy itself is really designed at a systemic level. It's not for a particular body part. It's designed to actually stimulate the release of the modulating hormones and proteins for protection and repair. And we don't think that you get that so much out of the nitrogen units because of the forced air cooling. Think about it, the upper part of the body, right? If you were doing Wim Hof and you only had to go in waist deep, you could probably tolerate that a lot longer. But if you have to go in up to your neck, right, where most of your heat exchange occurs in your core and where all your thermoreception is, it's certainly far more uncomfortable. So that's the area of the body that you need to be cooling to really activate this neuroendocrine system.
Oh yeah, by the way, there was a study with Wim Hof and some of his students. They were exposed to some toxin, I think chlorella. They did a study, exposed a lot of people, and they did not get sick. So he proved that with his methods, you could be, this is again like sort of a yogic. Yogis have done that, they've been poisoned and don't get sick, but these are regular people doing his method, and they were exposed to a toxin, did not get sick. So
yeah, I always in conversations I always say, well, I'm 53 years old. When I was younger, I don't remember the prevalence of the autoinflammatory diseases the way it is today. I didn't hear of lupus and celiac and Crohn's and even anaphylaxis, right? Just food allergens and things like that. There's now 6 out of every 10 kids in a classroom have some type of food allergy. And that's all immune system. The body was designed to be exposed to heat and cold shock, right? So extreme hot temperatures and extreme cold temperatures, but we thermoregulate. We live at 75 degrees. and that's probably not very good for the body. So to experience these cold shocks and heat shocks, and far infrared sauna is a good example of using heat shock or any type of sauna treatment, and then cold therapy. And so those release heat shock and cold shock proteins that are very good for the body.
Yeah, I have a sunlighting system. Do you do far infrared at your?
In some of the facilities, and we have a sunlight system in one of them in Scottsdale. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see doing that first, and then, well, I could see going back and forth.
Yeah. Well, we always promote cold before hot because of the constriction dilation issue, right? You do hot, and you're going to be creating dilation, and you don't want to go back into the cold and create the constriction again. So you do it the reverse. But a lot of people do cold whole body cryotherapy, and then we'll do far infrared.
Right. And you have like a walk-in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of far infrared, and then I have other therapies that seem, I always say that far infrared will inhibit microbes, but it doesn't knock them out. Like people wrestling with Lyme disease, for instance.
Right.
But far infrared I might start again. It causes a lot of toxic release.
Good. Yeah, I enjoy it. I love it.
Yeah, mine's been sitting for a while, but I've been looking at it saying, well, maybe we should do it again. So once again, I teach integrated protocols. So if you're interested in doing that, we could teach you how to integrate cryotherapy with other therapies. If you're suffering with some pretty heavy duty health issues, we would do a consult with you, but you could take a look at our YouTube channel, look at all our other therapies. In terms of cryotherapy, I highly recommend you find a center. I know you're not in all cities, but you are expanding. So Google US cryotherapy and look for locations. And definitely research Wim Hof. If you can't get to a US cryotherapy center because there's not one in your location, you might consider doing the Wim Hof cold therapy as another approach. Any closing comments or remarks?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I think that the awareness for self-treatment and awareness of, basically systemic treatments that can help people live healthier is really important. And, we've been fighting that challenge. I wouldn't say fighting it, but building the awareness around understanding what cold therapy does for the body for a decade now. So it seems like that time has flown by, but, over the last 4 or 5 years, the industry has really expanded. From day one, people had no idea what whole body cryotherapy was. And so to be at the point that we're at today and trying to look ahead 5 to 10 years and where the industry will be, I believe this is a technology that will be utilized by healthcare practitioners and hospital clinics for recovery post-surgically. It's already being used by athletes around the country for their recovery and repair. We're US Cryotherapy as a brand. We have chambers in 24 professional sports and college training rooms. We're in elite, high-end spas because we also sell the equipment as well as franchise the business. And so it's something that's here to stay. A decade later, you can say that we've treated 3.5 million people. We've never had an incident. We've seen great recoveries and testimonials. So the next phase of this is understanding this as a medical benefit. And I think that will happen at some point.
Yeah, similar to like hydrogen therapy is new. And in Asia, they're using it in hospitals.
Yeah.
So America, I would encourage anybody now that we're in the age of the internet to keep an open mind. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, Western medicine has a limited scope. So it's up to you to do the research. It's up to you. It's your health. It's your body. Look at all these therapies. Approach them, with an open mind and, experiment. Try. Kevin, thank you for coming out and appreciate all the good information and do your research, people, and definitely give this a try. They have all the centers have some type of introductory offer. I pay $116 a month on a 6-month contract. I think that's pretty impressive. I was going every day, literally 7 days a week for a while. Now I've tapered off a bit, but still, it's a really hell of a deal considering you can do 30 treatments a month.
Yeah, cost average that you're spending maybe $2 a visit, right? Where else can you get that?
Right.
It's,
So it's
it's not that cheap in most locations, but the reality of it is if you're spending $8 or $10 every time you walk into a facility to improve your health, I mean, consider the ramifications of that versus, driving through a In-N-Out burger today and paying $20 for a meal.
So once again, if anybody watching this interview, if you're trying to create an integrated, holistic protocol and want to figure out how to integrate cryotherapy with other therapies, we can work with you and give you a meaningful understanding of the technologies, so you have a good strategy. All right, Kevin, I appreciate you coming out.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate having me.